Have you ever thought about just how many games there are under the Mega 10 umbrella? You've got first-person dungeon crawlers, strategy RPGs, action RPGs, top-down RPGs, social sims. You get the point. The list goes on seemingly forever. And to borrow a nice quote from our friends at IGN, there's a little bit of something for everyone. With this in mind, it's pretty crazy to think that it all started with a series of novels. Digital Devil's story Megami Tensei, the first of which was released in 1986. These novels spawned an anime adaptation, a couple of video game adaptations, and ultimately ended up forming the basis for the franchise as we know it today. What are the books like? Do the games hold up today? Well, we're gonna have ourselves a little marathon and take a look at all of it. If you're interested in one part in particular, check out these timestamps to skip ahead. Otherwise, sit back, snort a line of coke, and pretend it's the 80s again, because we're about to read some crazy shit. If you don't know anything about the Megami Tensei novels, take a second. I'll wait. What do you think they're about? An epic conflict between law and chaos, or some kind of apocalypse survival story? A noble hero who slays demons? Well, you're wrong. Megami Tensei follows the escapades of Akemi Nakajima, the world's sexiest bullying victim, who summons the demon Loki to his school, fully intending to kill a few of his classmates. And he succeeds a little too much because a whole lot of people die and Loki is on the loose. It's up to him and the new transfer student Yumiko to put a stop to things. And did I mention the reincarnations of the Japanese deities Izanagi and Izanami? Let's just take things from the top. This is probably the only time you're going to see me reviewing a book on this channel, so we might as well do it right. I'm going to run you through the plot of the first one in pretty good detail because the anime and to some extent the games go right off of it. So the story starts by introducing us to Nakajima, a student who's incredibly talented with computers and excels in math and science. I wasn't kidding about the sexy part either. One quote from the book reads, "With his slender frame and delicate looks, if Nakajima swapped his uniform for a girl's sailor suit, he might very well be able to pass for a beautiful teenage girl." Nakajima just exudes Chad energy, so much that the book goes even on to explain lots of girls were interested in Nakajima, but none of them so far had been able to strike his fancy. Yeah, you don't stand a chance with Nakajima. Now, his life isn't all cupcakes and rainbows, though. At home, Nakajima has a poor relationship with his parents. His dad works overseas in Los Angeles, and his mom is always busy at work. Nakajima sits around at home writing computer programs, and apparently listening to the rock band Whitesnake, as the book notes, turning on the switch on the side of his speakers, the vocals of David Coverdale filled the room. Okay, you might be thinking, alright, he has some problems at home, but how is this prime male specimen getting bullied at school? Well, like all good stories, it starts with a woman. A student named Kyoko flirts with him. Nakajima says, "Miss me with that shit," and she runs back to Kondo, the resident tough guy. Kyoko tells Kondo that Nakajima attacked her, and that he promptly beats the shit out of our hero. From here on, Nakajima is going full Dicko mode as he sneaks into the school late at night to use their massive room-spanning computer to talk to Loki. Now, Nakajima thinks that he's only talking to Loki, but as demons are known to do, Loki kinda lies, and he's actually started manipulating things to appear in the real world on his own. Later on, Nakajima is in computer class when Loki uses the computers to assume control of his classmates. Nakajima gives the command to kill his bullies, and well, it happens. They also kill the teacher. The whole room gang is up on them, and to be honest, they put up a pretty good resistance, but ultimately, Kyoko gets bit in the cooch, and Kondo gets bonked in the head with a computer. At this point, Nakajima's like, hell yeah, I'm the shit, and he starts helping out Loki, thinking he's the one in charge. Loki's asking for sacrifices and things from Nakajima, and he's also a horn dog because he and the teacher Ohara have sex inside an Oculus Rift headset, and eventually Loki's like, yeah, you know what, I want Yumiko now. Well, Nakajima tries to help her out. He gives her a call, he's breathing all heavy and shit on the phone, and he's like, hey, don't come to school tomorrow. But it doesn't work, and before we know it, Loki breaks free, Yumiko's getting slapped around by a tentacle in the computer room at midnight. At this point, shit is beyond fucked. Loki's just going crazy with these tentacles, and yes, they can do exactly what you think they can do. Nakajima tries to summon Cerberus, it doesn't work at all, and Yumiko dies. Yeah. But it's alright, because Izanami talks to her in a dream, and she's like, you gotta wake up. So she does. She starts shooting lasers out of her eyes and kicking major ass long enough to grab Nakajima and warp the fuck out. Then she dies again. Nakajima suddenly decides he's upset about the death of a girl he just met, even though he just killed half of his school. And from then on, it's hero time as he works to bring Yumiko to Izanami's burial site to get a chance at reviving her. While this is going on, Loki is just going apeshit. He takes over a bank, and I guess this is like part of his plan for world domination, but it doesn't really explain this part very much in the anime or the book. I guess this bank is just important enough to start with. He's also trying to catch up with Nakajima to ensure that nobody can stop him later. Well, Nakajima makes it to the tomb with the help of Cerberus. He makes his way past a demon called Yamotsu Shikome, who gives him these orbs. Then Loki shows up and kills Yamotsu Shikome. Nakajima slaps these two balls together and gets the classic sword Hino Kakatsuchi. He beats Loki, Yumiko's revived. But then Izanami says that there's still a lot of evil left to take care of, and the book ends on a cliffhanger, with Ohara trying to chat on Discord with Loki, except it's actually the demon Set, which means there's an even worse guy out there to take care of. And that's that. Now, this was only the first book, and the reason I wanted to go through it so extensively is because this is the book that received the anime adaptation, and it's kind of like the most famous. The video games also seem to take most of their material from the first book. If you're interested in the history of Megami Tensei, like the whole franchise, I think this is well worth reading. It's actually pretty short, you can get through it in a few hours. Now, is it a classic? No. It reminds me of a cheesy B-movie horror plot or some strange fanfiction you stumble across at 3 AM. I think that's the point. I mean, when the author was writing this, I don't think he intended it to be Shakespeare. It's quick, dumb fun, and I think if you go into it with that expectation, it's a decent book. I'm not even sure what the moral of the story is, like, don't kill your classmates, don't summon demons, or maybe it's like, no matter how bad you mess up, you can always work to reverse it, or maybe it's like, even throughout countless generations, our mistakes follow us, they're bound to be repeated, and we're always susceptible to the temptations of revenge, lust, and power. Or maybe it's just a fucking cheesy, guilty pleasure. However you want to look at this is where it all started, and I think it's worth at least a quick read. So, I've been using footage from the anime to illustrate this story. Let's talk about that for a minute. The story with the anime is the exact same as what I just described, and it does an okay job of fitting it all into around 40 minutes of watch time. The biggest problem I have with it is that if you're watching it without having read the novels beforehand, there are parts that just don't really make sense. For example, the opening part where Nakajima's interacting with his mother and all that's just skipped in the anime. And when Yumiko arrives at the school only a few minutes in, basically everyone's already under control of Loki. Like this part where Ohara just listens to what Nakajima says. If you haven't read the book, you might be wondering why she's just obedient to him like that. It's because Loki is influencing things, but that might not immediately be clear without the context that the book gives. There are also some smaller details that the book explains but the anime doesn't. Like, there's this one part where the camera focuses in on these flies. Well, in the novel it explains that Loki can use flies to communicate and he can actually see through their eyes. This is a minor thing, but I do think it's funny that they chose to show it in the anime like that without really explaining it. Like, I guess you'd pick up on the idea that, okay, Loki must use these somehow to communicate, but when I watched it, it just seemed kinda out of place. And the last thing that's sort of funny is the choice of music. Let's take a look at this part where it's a flashback to Izanami chasing Izanagi down a tunnel. Why does it sound like the opening to Back to the Future? That might be kind of a nitpick, but it's just not the music I would have chosen for this part. Oh well, I mean, I truly think this anime was designed for people that already read the first novel. It does an alright job of standing alone, but I assure you, if you read the book first, you'll appreciate the anime a lot more. It's only 40 minutes, so if you want to check it out, I'd say go for it. You're not really losing that much, but again, if you care enough about the story, just read the book first. As for the next two books in the series, well, the second one doesn't have nearly as much in the way of adaptations. Elements of the story are present in the video games, like the demon Set and the appearance of Lucifer, but that's about it. I'll give you a little rundown of the second book if you're interested, however, this one is going to be pretty quick. Basically, Ohara is still out there trying to summon Set, and Nakajima ends up working with a professor and a member of the Special Forces to stop it. Nakajima and Yumiko's parents end up being killed as they're under control of a demon from Ohara. And basically what happens is Yumiko like has to kill them to protect Nakajima because they're like possessed. So while Nakajima stays behind to grieve his parents, his mom, Yumiko heads out, and to be honest, shit gets kinda complicated. Essentially, Set is trying to like merge the demon worlds, and he's using Yumiko to create his true body. So Nakajima tries to stop him, but he fails, and then they're like, alright, we should summon Set, but into a satellite orbiting the Earth, so he's just stuck up there in space, which sounds like a good idea, except Nakajima realizes, wait a second, Yumiko's gonna go with him, because, you know, he still has her. So Nakajima goes and he returns to Izanami's grave. He gets her robe, which is actually something that kinda happens in the game, although basically none of that other stuff happens. Nakajima ends up going up into space, and he ends up beating Set and saving Yumiko. But there's this portal that opens up to the demon worlds, and the book kinda just ends with the portal staying open. So, I know the first book wasn't exactly realistic, but if you look at it from the perspective of the 80s, like, okay, maybe it had some believability to it. You know, computers were a pretty new thing back then. I mean, they took up whole rooms. A lot of people weren't really sure about the limits of what a computer could do. And if you think about it, I mean, imagine showing a computer to someone from like 200 years ago. They'd probably call it magic. So to say that a computer could summon a demon seems kind of stupid now, but maybe back when programming seemed to be like this new, almost magical thing, maybe you could believe it. Anyway, what I'm trying to say is, if you thought the first one was batshit crazy, this one is even more so. I mean, the dude goes up to space and fights a big snake. I don't know, man. Like I said, there's a very loose connection to the games from this novel, and that's about it. If you really want to read this one, it is translated into English, go for it, but I don't think you're missing much if you decide to skip it. Now, there's still another book, Oh Yeah, Part 3, which actually hasn't yet been translated into English. This one is even less relevant than the other two, and it actually came out after the games did, so there's no correlation really. I'll just give you the highlights of this one. If you don't want me to ruin your week, please just close your ears now. Alright, are you ready for this fucking bomb drop? Nakajima dies. Yeah, the world is being invaded by even more demons, and while Nakajima and Yumiko are fighting some of them, someone calls Yumiko a monster because of these scars that she has. So Nakajima flips his shit and kills a guy, and everyone's like, wow, this dude's a demon, he's not cool at all. So Nakajima gets arrested and put on trial, but get ready for this. Lucifer is pulling the strings behind the trial. Nakajima gets exposed for killing his classmates by the kid's parents, so he gets sentenced to death. And on the day of his execution, they bring his dad in, I guess he's finally back from LA, and they kill him. In front of Nakajima. And after that, Nakajima just goes totally apeshit for the last time in his life, as during the ensuing slaughter, he attacks Yumiko, who then kills him, and then he dies in her arms, and that's the end. Yeah, let's just forget about this one, okay? I mean, damn. Maybe it's a good thing this one didn't get translated. Nagajima's dead, his parents are dead, Yumiko's parents are dead, and like, remember Lucifer? He's still out there. All of the demons are still out there. I mean, what kind of ending is that? I'm really glad the games didn't take this one into account. I mean, for all intents and purposes, this might as well be forgotten about. As far as the games are concerned, Nakajima beats Lucifer and like, shit's all happy. I mean, I get enjoying a dark ending, but holy shit. Whew, okay. Anyway, that about covers it for the books. There are actually more. In fact, there's an entire series called New Digital Devil Story which continues things, and the first one of these came out in 1990. This is moving a little too far ahead for now. I haven't read these, they aren't related to the games or anything, and I'm not sure they're even translated. So anyway, now to the part that you've really been waiting for, the video game adaptations. The very first Megami Tensei game may not look like what you'd expect. It's a dungeon crawler, but not at all like any other game in the franchise. This is Digital Devil Story Megami Tensei, released on MSX computers by the company Telenet in 1987. This game has no relation to the titles later released by Atlus, but it is the first in the entire franchise. Looks pretty crazy, right? If you've ever heard of the game Gauntlet, it plays kinda like that. This is a top-down arcade action type game. You run around these dungeons as Nakajima and you shoot swords at these balls of scrambled eggs. I don't know, I guess they're supposed to be demons or slimes or something. This is a pretty simple game. You're basically just trying to find the stairs and get to the end. You can find different items like health restoratives, as well as other power-up type items that you can store in your inventory for later. As you might have noticed, there are moon phases in this game, which affect things like the strength of enemies during a full moon. Each world in the expanse that you go through is based on Jewish mysticism, with the locations named after manifestations of God in the physical and metaphysical universe. Damn, okay. In other words, you're gonna run through some mazes that change color every so often. I mean, for what it is, the game works at least. I wouldn't exactly say it's the most fun thing in the world, but if you're interested in messing around in this for like 10 minutes, go for it. In terms of complaints, the enemies seem to take a lot of hits, Nakajima is kind of clunky to control, and the shooting doesn't feel very fluid. Some of these could be chalked up to emulation, but unless you can find a copy of this game and a compatible computer, I think that's the only option out there right now for most people. Now this might be a surprise, but there's actually another version of this game. Yeah, I guess people couldn't get enough Megami Tensei on their computers. This is Megami Tensei on the PC-88, and let me say, emulating this ended up being a little bit of an adventure in itself. This is the first time I've tried to emulate a computer-type system aside from the MSX, which was dead simple. You just click the ROM to load it and play the game. Well, with the PC-88 emulator, you have to do some wacky shit, like making sure you put the right discs in the right slot, setting the computer the proper frequency, and making sure that you're configured to the right mode. If you put the discs in the wrong slot, or you only put in one, or you don't take the computer out to dinner first, it summons an actual fucking demon, and this happens. So, yeah. Be careful when you're emulating PC-88. It's not really that hard once you figure it out, to be fair, or maybe I'm just stupid, but it's something to keep in mind if you want to try this one out for yourself. Once you get it started, you're greeted with this menacing song and the Telenet logo, and you just know you're in for something fucked up. This game is a bit more interesting and amps up the graphics significantly. I mean, they still aren't great, but it's a sizable improvement. For some reason, my screen looks like somebody spilled sand all over it, and again, I'm not sure if this is a configuration problem on my end, or the game just looks like that. Still, you can tell the sprites have a bit more detail, as do the graphics on the side of the screen. You can also shoot diagonally now, which is pretty cool. Basically, this one fixes everything I complained about before, so it's a lot less clunky. I was also able to track down the manual for this version online too, which sheds a bit more light on the mechanics of the game. Surprisingly, it has a lot of detail inside. It talks about things like being able to summon Cerberus and Yumiko, and there's even some kind of item fusion or crafting system. Deeper in the manual, it even shows how all the worlds are connected, and this page seems to be talking about the Kabbalah, which is a school of thought in Jewish tradition, and has a pretty heavy influence on Megaten, seen in demons like Metatron later on. This is actually pretty impressive to me. I mean, that's a lot of detail and explanation for such a simple little dungeon crawler. I was never actually able to figure out the crafting system, but that could just be me. I didn't make it that far, and I didn't find that many items. I couldn't really figure out how to summon Cerberus either. I can read some Japanese, but I'm still pretty mediocre, and there were a lot of kanji that I didn't know in the manual. Even without figuring these elements of the game out, I would still say this is the superior version. So at the end of the day, if you're interested in playing these, just check out the PC-88 version. Like I said, you're probably not going to be glued to your computer playing this, but it's fun for a little while if you're just interested in the history of the franchise, or you just want to try out something kind of weird and obscure. And with that, we're on to the main event, and the one you're more likely to have heard of. Digital Devil Story Megami Tensei for the Famicom, developed by Atlus, also released in 1987. Strap yourselves in for this one, folks. I have a lot to say about this game. This was a fucking experience right here. Megami Tensei is one of the most immersive games I've ever played, because you really feel like you're losing your fucking mind in some dark, demon-filled hellhole. I went into this for this review and I was like, alright, a game from 87. I'll be able to beat this in like 10 hours max and have a nice little discussion. No. No. Hell fucking no. This game took me at least 40 or 50 hours, and it was quite honestly one of the most painful experiences I have ever trudged myself through. I don't know if playing this game made me lose my mind, because despite how frustrating, tedious, and dated it felt to play, I still can't say I hate it. I'm actually kinda glad I played it, but hey, let's not get ahead of ourselves here. You know the drill. Let me walk you through it, and we'll face the suffering together. The game opens up with a pretty cool little graphic of Nakajima and Yumiko sitting at a computer, and it follows a familiar story. The genius programmer Nakajima invented a demon summoning program, and the demons Loki and Set emerged. Lucifer basically revived them and gave them some power, and now it's up to you and Yumiko to explore a giant dungeon that appeared in Izanami's burial site and take them all out. Oh yeah, you might have noticed that it isn't in English. Well, there's an English patch floating around out there if you're interested, but I was actually able to handle the Japanese in this one, so it didn't really matter. I've heard the English patch causes some bugs, but other than that, it looks pretty good. Now don't worry, I just told you the entire story, and that's probably the most text you're gonna see at one time until the very end of the game. Anyway, after this, you pick your stats. For Nakajima, I dumped a lot into strength and speed, and for Yumiko, I gave a lot of points to intelligence. Yumiko can cast magic, Nakajima can't, so starting off with a stat spread like this is a pretty good baseline. Also, look at these character portraits. These are pretty cool. They look like screenshots of the OVA or something made into 8-bit. It's a small touch, but I like it. So then, you get dumped into this big blue room and it's on. Well, you're in Mikon City on the 8th floor of Daedalus Tower, and you better get familiar with this room because you're gonna be back here an awful lot. Let's take a look around. You got some NPCs you can talk to, some of which look vaguely threatening, and others like this lady that kinda look like dolls or something. You'll also find the Kaifuku, or Recovery Spring, there's a weapons and armor shop, and there's a Cathedral of Shadows. To touch on the graphics again for a second, I really like these shop graphics. They're simple, yeah, but the Cathedral of Shadows just looks dark and dirty, the Kaifuku looks strange and kinda psychedelic, and the weapons shop is just cozy. It really does make you imagine that you're in this strange, functioning city that just exists in this dungeon for some reason. Now, you also have this guy. This is the password guy. Yeah, let's talk about that for a second. The game doesn't have a save feature. Yep, anytime you want to turn this thing off and pick it up again later, you better get a password or you have to start all the way over from the beginning. This is the only password guy in the game, and though you can learn a spell that gives you a password, until then, it's kind of an inconvenience. When you die, you can continue without entering a password as many times as you want, but you get sent all the way back here no matter where in the game you were, with only half of your money. This is, again, inconvenient and can make for some tedious backtracking. Of course, you're better off just using a save state to save yourself a lot of trouble, but if for some reason you're insane enough to try the game without save states, well, be warned. Before you go anywhere, find the money hidden on this floor and get some weapons and armor. If you go further without buying this shit, you're gonna get your ass kicked, no joke. Your first task is to get to the bottom of this tower and fight the Minotaur. Huh, you know, that sounds kind of familiar, right? Like an SMT4? Maybe it's a coincidence, or maybe that was a callback to this. Who knows? So, let's talk about the combat, because you're gonna be doing a metric shitload of it to say the least. It's pretty basic, but overall, I think it's good enough for 1987. It's essentially what you'd expect from any other first-person Megami Tensei title, but much simpler. There are no buff or debuff spells save for one called Hyper, which is an attack buff spell that you can learn on some late-game demons. The options you have in combat are to attack, run, defend, or with Nakajima you can use your comp to summon or negotiate with demons. Most of the time, combat is just a quick slap fight between each party, with very little strategy required save for the bosses and a few enemies. Early on, you're going to want to pay attention because with such low health and MP, you can easily be knocked out and sent all the way back to the start. I spent a few hours in Daedalus just grinding for money and levels, and I'd suggest you do the same, because as you go further down the tower, the monsters are going to get harder, and Minotaur's a pretty tough guy even when I face him after reaching level 10. I'm just going to say it now, get used to grinding. If you think a few hours for Minotaur is too much, don't even bother playing past this part of the game. You'll see what I'm talking about later. Another important reason to grind this early is to get more MP on Yumiko, who has a very, very small supply of it early on. In these early stages of the game, every use of magic by Yumiko is critical. There are no MP restorative items, or really any items at all that you can use outside of battle, aside from beads. Now, beads drop fairly often from enemies and fully restore a character's health. Don't even bother hoarding these because they drop enough that you can use them as necessary and you'll still have a decent supply of them. They can't be used in battle, which would have been nice, but at least it's something to keep you going while you're dungeon crawling. Make sure you grab a few demons. Negotiation is pretty simple, and normally they'll ask you like one question and then they'll start asking you for money or magnetite. One in particular worth grabbing is none other than Cerberus, who has an ass ton of health considering it's the first dungeon of the game. He stays relevant for quite a while, and I used him up to the third dungeon. Grab a couple of other demons too to round out your party. Minotaur is your first big challenge, and basically he just has a lot of health. Make sure you show up to him with as much MP as you can manage, because every healing spell counts, and you don't want to run out near the end and have him kill you. Keep swinging and he'll go down, that's about all I can say. After this, you get a special gem, and quite a few areas are opened up for you, including an elevator that you can use to go back to the city. One place that you can go to is Bien, the Sky City, and the other is Valhalla Corridor. You have to pass through Valhalla Corridor to reach Bien, and the only way to get inside Bien is to find this shield for a guy named Garu. This shield is in a door just outside the 4th floor elevator that opens when you beat Minotaur. So, what are we gonna do? Well, I think in theory you could do Valhalla first. If you walk around in there, you'll immediately notice that the enemies are pretty tough. However, if you manage to beat some, they offer decent XP. You can also find a few treasures. You'll have better luck in Bien, so let's just go there first. This place is pretty neat. You'll actually be coming back here quite a bit too. It's not just a dungeon. It's actually kind of like one big teleportation terminal. First though, we have to beat the boss, and it's Medusa. Minotaur and Medusa? I don't know, seems pretty fishy to me, Atlus. Anyway, this place isn't too tough in terms of exploration. There are a few enemies like these Medusa statue things that can paralyze you. If this happens to a demon, it's honestly no big deal, because you can just unsummon them and then bring them back out and it's cured. If it happens to Nakajima or Yumiko though, God help you, because you have to go all the way back to the Cathedral of Shadows. Oh yeah, there's not another Cathedral of Shadows in the entire game. So if you need to fuse a demon, revive a dead party member, or cure some status ailments, well, have fun walking all the way back if you don't have the right spell for it. If Nakajima gets paralyzed, you're pretty fucked because you can't use the comp. There's an item in this place called a Tabasa statue that you should find. This item prevents the true Medusa boss at the top of the city from paralyzing you, making her encounter just another slap fight instead of something potentially much more frustrating. If you're having trouble with this fight, just try to fuse better demons, make sure you buy the new weapons and armors wherever there's a shop. After you beat Medusa, a new shop opens, but there's also one you can access in the Valhalla Corridor too. These make a pretty big difference when going through the game, and since there are barely any buff spells, you're really going to want these to help soften some of the damage. So when she goes down, you get another gem, and those shops open up down below, including a recovery spring. You'll probably be coming back to this one a lot, and as far as I'm aware, this is the only other recovery spring in the entire game. So from here on out, there are no cities and safe areas, it's all just one big shit pit clusterfuck to the end. There's also an NPC you can find after Medusa that gives you a ticket, and this ticket lets you talk to the captain, who can fly the city to other dungeons. Yeah, you can move this entire dungeon and it like docks with the other ones. I like this, it starts to feel like home base after a while, and you'll quickly memorize the second floor with how much you come in and out to move to different dungeons and use the recovery spring. After this, you're going to want to go back out to where we were before in Valhalla. As you might imagine, Loki lives here, and it's already time to fight him. Valhalla is pretty big and has a few important things we need to do in it. One of the most important is Rick. Yeah, there's this fucking statue in the basement named Rick, and when you talk to him and help him out, he'll give you his bracelet and transform into a demon that joins your party. Rick turns himself into a demon, funniest shit I've ever seen. You don't want to miss this. Rick's bracelet is an item you have to have to complete the game, and you don't even use it until right near the end. Just don't miss this, it'll save you a lot of annoying backtracking. This dungeon also starts our painful saga with Rag, this little fucknut who sells items that again you have to complete the game. This could just be because my Japanese isn't so great, but I'm almost positive that nowhere in the game tells you that you need some of the items this guy has. Smug little shit. To get items from Rag, you have to have an amethyst. You can actually find an amethyst right next to where Rick was, and there's another one across the dungeon. You can only carry one at a time, and you need 2 items from Rag, so no matter how you cut it, you're gonna be Rag's butt boy, running around grabbing gems for him. The items you need are the Ares necklace and the Heaven Magatama. The first item on the list is called Dragon's Whisker, and it fully heals your party. Nice, but not really worth it unless you're really in a pinch. The second item says Call Thunder. This item is honestly hilarious. If you press it, it fucking hurts you. You get struck by lightning or some shit. Literally just a giant middle finger for wasting your time and getting an amethyst for him. So never press this button. Anyway, the ones you want are the 3rd and 4th, so make sure you get each one. After you have these, you can finally go and fight Loki. The strategy here is basically the same. Again, grind. And I mean grind a lot. Like, be at least level 20. You're gonna start to hate yourself, feel your sanity wearing down because the grind is picking up a little bit. Have some stronger demons, and have one that can cast a healing spell to support Yumiko's healing, and you should be okay. One funny thing about the door to Loki's chamber is that it's actually inside of a dark room, and once you go in his room, you can't come back out unless you die or he dies. So don't come in here unprepared. You're actually dicked if you do it by accident. Honestly though, Loki isn't super hard despite being the big man of the first book and the OVA. Beating him just gives you yet another gem, and now you're left to figure things out again. Head back to BN because we're about to fly the city to fucking hell. The place you want to fly is called the Mazurka Corridor. Once you step foot in Mazurka, just kiss yourself and your sanity goodbye. You will never be the same by the time you're done in Mazurka, and its basement, which is literally called the Rotting Sea of Flames. This place sucks fat balls, and that's putting it lightly. Put on your goggles because we're about to do a deep dive into some shit. Perhaps the biggest thing you want to look for in Mazurka are 2 enemies. Loa, which is this floating skull, and vampires. These enemies can do something god-awful, something absolutely unspeakable, a disgusting, blasphemous thing. They can permanently reduce your level with a certain attack. This sucks. If you're on an emulator, I would personally suggest that you have a save state somewhere around here, like the start of the dungeon, because if you get hit with that spell, it's just ass. I would rather have an instant kill spell than something that reduces your level. It's a huge time waster, especially when you're at the point that you're only fighting these guys to grind in the first place. These spells are cruel, and I encourage you to avoid them at all costs. There's a shop on the 6th floor, which is actually a pretty crazy place itself, because the entire thing is just filled with doors, most of which lead to nowhere. Now, I didn't mention this yet, but I think it's pretty interesting. When I was playing this game, like 80% of the time when I encountered a battle, it was always after entering a door. I swear, the doors are like monster spawners. So a quick way to grind is just to run in and out of a door, because you will get a ton of encounters. In a place like this though, it's pretty annoying, because for each wrong door you enter, that's more time wasted either fighting or escaping. The shop here has some good weapons and armor that are worth buying at least, so I would suggest that you find it. Again, there are a couple items that you have to find here. One is called the Silver Relief, and it allows you to see the boss of this section. To get this item, you have to go around until you reach another one of these sections where you can't see anything, and the thief Gaia is in here. He has the item, and he charges you this hilariously exorbitant price for it. I've heard people say that the price he charges you is actually always equal to the amount of money that you have, but the first time I saw this guy, he charged me way more than I had, and I couldn't like negotiate and get him to lower it or anything, so I just left. Except right after I got my ass kicked by a monster, and for the hell of it, I went back to Gaia to see if any of my new money would count for anything, and to my surprise, the price was like 7,000 lower. I don't really understand this, and I thought for a minute that the price was tied to my HP, because when I first came up to him I had full HP and now it was near empty. I really don't know what triggered it to be so much lower, but hey, I bought the statue. The other item you need is the Ratotsu statue. This thing is on the 5th floor, and to get it, you need that Ares necklace that we got earlier. Make sure you have it. Basically, you do some Indiana Jones style treasure swap where you take the statue and replace it with a necklace to avoid setting off a trap. So now with that, we're ready to fight the boss. Make your way there, and look out for a floor where you can't use your comp. Eventually, you'll come across the boss, Heket. Now, I would say be between level 25 to 30 for this part. She's not super tough, but she does have some pretty hard-hitting spells. It's the same drill: grind, fuse, save your magic for the boss. This is the last boss that I found to be particularly easy without a huge amount of grinding, so count yourself lucky, but also get ready for some pain. When Heket dies, you get yet another gem, and you now have to make your way into the rotting sea of flames. I gotta preface this by reiterating that, like I said at the start, this is perhaps one of the most painful games I have ever played, and it's all because of this part. Really, if you make it this far into the game, like, applause to you, but heavily consider if you want to keep going. The grind I faced in here was unreal. No joke, like any other game I've ever played. I was in here for 12 hours minimum, just grinding. Okay, let's just take a look at what we're dealing with. Every step you take in this place drains your health because, well, you're walking through fire. The graphics actually kind of remind me of this, but I get it, it's supposed to be fire. This is a big place and it can be pretty annoying to explore because you're always being hurt. Try your best not to backtrack too much because it can really drain your MP if you end up going in circles. I get it though, it can be tough. Here's the deal why you have to grind here so much. The boss of this section is none other than Set, and he has about 2500 health and is much higher level than Heket was. Basically, you need to close some of that level gap, and being level 30 just wouldn't be enough. He can hit you for around 100 damage per turn, and this was when I was at level 50, mind you. So you're gonna have to grind 20 levels, and that's if you were hitting the fucking bricks earlier and reached level 30. But you could be lower than that, which just means that Hell owns your cute little ass for that much longer. There's a room down here in Hell that for some reason doesn't have fire in it, and it also has a rag shop in it. Old Rag, man, this guy. So, if you're subscribed to me, you might have seen my video about this, but I'll go through it again. Rag shop is here, and right outside his room is this pile of amethysts. What a lazy piece of shit. This is gonna come in handy for grinding though, because remember the Dragon's Whisker? It heals your entire party. Are you catching on to my idea yet? Yep, you're gonna go out of this room, grind until you're almost dead, come back in, grab a crystal, trade it for the full restore, then you're gonna do that again, and again, and again, and again, and again, for hours. This is the best way I could find to grind as painlessly as possible, and it still hurts, like, a lot. This part just blows. I was down in this room for way too many hours, just listening to Spotify and auto-battling. It really sucks. I honestly felt like I was doing something wrong. Like, why does it take so long? The only thing I can figure is that maybe if you get really lost throughout the game, you'll just grind yourself up to the right level without really trying. But if you finish those dungeons in a normal amount of time, I really just don't think it's possible to be level 50 by the time you're here. Maybe you can beat Set at a lower level, sure, but it just doesn't seem like it'd be very easy. You're gonna want the extra health because, again, he hits pretty hard. All I can say is, either get yourself really fucking lost in Valhalla or Mazurka, or come on down to Hell and grind this shit for 12 hours. Either way, it's not fun, and it's gonna murder your brain cells. I really wanted to quit on this part, but I kept going, and it was honestly like a contemplative 12 hours as I wondered, do I hate myself? Do I actually have some kind of masochism thing going on? Or do I really just enjoy being disappointed? I can't figure it out, but I finished it, because I really like you guys. Anyway, if you can shred yourself with this absolute fucking slog of a grind, congrats, we can keep going. We have to find Izanami while we're down here. When you reach her chamber, you get this pretty cool graphic. Well, you better have already beaten the previous bosses because you're gonna need all the gems that they dropped. I guess it's theoretically possible to get this far and not beat them all, but I don't really see how you do it. This part is also pretty fucking funny. This game just hates you, really, it does. It doesn't like you at all. To free Izanami, you have to put the gems on her mask in the right order. You better do this in the right order, or guess what happens? You get teleported all the way back to the start of the fucking game. You wanna hear something else that's even funnier? If you back out of this dialogue box and leave the room, you get locked out. Yeah, I mean that. You can't go back inside. As far as I'm aware, this is literally a fail state for the game. Like, there's nothing else you can do. I don't think you can keep going. So, hope you had a password or a save state, otherwise, I mean, I guess you're just fucked. And you know, you gotta wonder, if backing out of a room just locks you out, I wonder what would happen if, after putting the gems in the wrong order, you walked all the way back here. Like, would you still be locked out? That'd be funny. I'd like to see the look on somebody's face if they accidentally did this in 1987. I bet that was some shit. Anyway, the proper order is the coarse gem goes in the forehead, silent gem goes in the right eye, and old gem in the left eye. If you do it right, you free her, and you get a robe which protects you from taking damage in the fire down here. Nice. After this, you're going to want to head back up a couple floors to the second floor. There's a mini-boss up here called Persky, and when you beat him, you get an item that'll periodically stun Set and make him waste a turn. I think this is optional, but you might as well grab it. There's also an item on the first floor, a demon in a bottle called Rusu, that will tell you if there's a secret door nearby. Set just so happens to be behind the secret door, and that's also conveniently located in a room where you can't see. For Set, you're going to want to bring the big shit with you. Get demons like Thor, Anubis, Susanoo, or Sphinx. High level stuff. You need a group healing spell. There's a demon called Bastet that's around level 30 that has it, and the aforementioned Sphinx also has it. Unfortunately, Yumiko can't learn the group heal spell, but she can learn a single target full heal that comes in handy. To further prove that this game hates you, Set can also use a move where he just smiles at you, and your level permanently decreases. The guy who thought of this move must have really liked it. I wasn't able to squeeze my way out of this one because it happened to be right in the middle of the fight, so this boss erased a good hour of grinding from my life. Thanks, Set. Well, although his fight's a bit longer than the others, it is perfectly doable if you're a high enough level. I wish I had more advice to give you, like elemental weaknesses or debuffs or something, but you know, they don't have that. So just keep swinging, keep your HP high enough that he has to take at least a couple turns to kill you, and make sure you're smart with your MP. If you keep it up, he'll eventually go down, and he drops you a pretty sick shield for Nakajima that's actually the best in the entire game. Not too bad. Well, with that, we're going to want to go back to Sky City one more time. We're actually close to the end of the game now, although if it sounded easy to get this far, remember, we did enough grinding for 3 lifetimes, and it's been a long time since we started. This game features the Hino Kagetsuchi sword, just like so many other titles, and we'd be dumb not to pick that up, so let's start with that. Remember that demon in a bottle we found in Hell? If you head up to the 4th floor of BN, you'll find a spot where there's a secret door, and you end up in this big room full of pitfalls that drop you down to the bottom floor. One of these drops you to the right spot, and you end up in another room that's filled with more traps, but if you make it to the end of this one, you find a staircase that leads to the sword. Kinda difficult to navigate, pretty much just trial and error. There are maps of this online if you don't want to bother with it. Funny thing though, and there's always a funny thing in Megami Tensei, so I got to the sword and I couldn't fucking pull it out of the ground. Okay, what's the big idea with that, right? So I checked my level and it's gone from 50 to 49. My strength went from being maxed out to slightly lower. Fucking Set. God damn it, dude. I'm guessing you have to be like level 50 or maxed out strength to pull this sword, so yeah, I have to leave and go grind 1 level, then come all the way back. After that's all over, we finally have it, and as you'd expect, the sword kicks ass. At least we finally feel a little bit of power and satisfaction, right? Although it doesn't feel as good as in other games, but it's something. The last dungeon is called Infiny, and it's Lucifer's own palace of ass torture. The floors are sprawling and the encounters are pretty tough. One thing that's absolutely important, and this is the last thing in the game that is absolutely required, is that there's an NPC on the 4th floor that lets you know about a white crystal that can help you against Lucifer. Don't just ignore this. You need this stupid white crystal. And guess where it is? I'm all ears, man. Come on, give it your best guess. Did you say fucking hell? Yeah, you're right, that's where it is. So you take your sorry ass back out the door, all the way back down into the rotting sea of flames, and there's this place where you can find a jar. Now I really hope you took Rick's bracelet all the way back in Valhalla because you need it here. If you have it, you get the white crystal from the jar. Then you gotta turn around and go all the way back to Lucifer's place, and then you can carry on with the dungeon. This place is pretty frustrating in some parts, like this giant room where you can't see shit and you just bounce off the walls for like 10 minutes. Very fun game design in here. The further you get, it starts to turn red, and you're getting close to the end now. As you get to the top, you get this encounter at a door with nothing? It's like the fog or something, but it's literally just a blank sprite. Okay, so this guy isn't too hard at all. Then you go in, and there's a room with different doors and pitfalls all around. The far end of the room is where Lucifer is, but these side rooms have some optional mini-bosses. One is Astaroth, and the other is Beelzebub, who is a blank sprite. Again, alright? I mean, is he supposed to be like a fly or something? Is he so small that we can't see him? Maybe they just ran out of money near the end. After all this, all the torture and grinding, you're finally at the end. It feels like a sloppy victory, like you're finally here, but at what cost? You lost your mind way back in Berserker, and now you're just a demon-slaying machine, driven insane by the desire to grow stronger. Anyway, let's check out Lucifer. You step in and there he is, big man himself. Lucifer has an assload of health, around 8,000, which is like 4 times more than Seth. If you have a strong party, and by the way, I'm basically using the same one as with Seth, so you should be fine. I think if you're around level 50, it should be no problem. Anyway, provided your party's good enough, this should just be like one big 30-minute slap fight. Sometimes Lucifer will try to cast this spell that fully heals him. Well, it never works if you have the white crystal. If you don't have this thing, you're screwed. He's going to heal himself pretty often. Enjoy those free turns because you can use them to get healed up and deal some extra damage. After quite a while of just slapping and healing, he goes down and the game's over. At least this cutscene is pretty cool. I do like the art in this game. So, was it worth it? I don't know. I am glad I played this game, honestly, because it was really cool to see the beginnings of the franchise, and I felt satisfied that I actually managed to finish it, but I don't think I can suggest you play this with a good conscience. At least not to completion. I'll put it this way, if you're interested, play it, and see if you can make it up to Minotaur. If you're bored by then, just call it a day. I think anyone who really likes Mega 10 should play this, but only for like 10 minutes, or again, until you're bored. Don't push yourself through it like me, unless you really like grinding or you hate yourself as much as I do. If I had to place it on a tier list, I'd probably give it a D. Now, fans of Megami Tensei, don't be upset. I do like this game, I mean, I did finish it, but compared to other titles in the franchise, it just doesn't measure up. Sure, it's a game from 1987, so that's logical. Now, I also know that there's a remake of this game, Kyu-Yaku Megami Tensei for the Super Famicom. I've heard this version has a save feature, and it's more user-friendly, so maybe that one's better, but you'll find me dead before you find me playing for this game again. Overall, for a first entry, I'd say this is a decent game, but the only point in playing it today is if you're really interested in Mega 10 history, or you have a thing for torture and 8-bit. Well, we're finally at the end. We looked at a lot of Megami Tensei stuff, a lot of which unfortunately doesn't have much discussion online. Maybe there's a reason for that, but I'd like to see what you guys think of the games, the novels, and the anime too, so let me know down below in the comments. As always, thanks for watching, and feel free to leave suggestions for future reviews. This was the Megami Tensei experience, and I'll see you guys next time.